The first sign something was wrong came 3 months after I moved into Oak Ridge Estates. My electric bill arrived, nearly double what it had been the previous month. I assumed it was a billing error. I called the power company, waited on hold for 47 minutes, only to be told that the reading was accurate and perhaps I should consider my usage habits. I explained that I lived alone, worked during the day, used LED bulbs throughout my house, and had energy-efficient appliances. The representative suggested I might have left a window open while running the air conditioning. I hung up and examined my habits. I unplugged electronics when not in use. I reduced my thermostat usage. I even started taking shorter showers, thinking perhaps my water heater was the culprit. The following month, my bill rose another 15%. This made absolutely no sense. I requested a meter check from the power company. They sent a technician who spent all of 4 minutes looking at my meter before declaring it was functioning perfectly. He suggested my appliances might be faulty, or that perhaps I was not being honest about my usage. The situation continued for 4 more months, each bill higher than the last. I began keeping detailed logs of my electricity usage. When I was home, when I was away, which appliances I used and for how long. I even installed a monitoring system that tracked consumption throughout the day. The data revealed something strange. Even when I was away at work, there were significant power draws occurring, particularly during afternoon hours. One evening during a thunderstorm, I noticed the lights in my home dimming repeatedly, almost rhythmically. The television flickered on and off. This was not normal storm behavior. I grabbed my raincoat and flashlight and ventured outside. The rain pounded against my skin as I made my way to the electrical meter. The readings were fluctuating wildly, jumping up and down as if something was repeatedly connecting and disconnecting from my system. I followed the main power line from the street to my house, then around the perimeter of my property. The flashlight beam caught something unusual where my yard met my neighbor's extravagant landscaping. A small junction box, partially hidden beneath ornamental grasses and mulch. This definitely did not belong here. I pushed aside the wet foliage for a closer look. What I found made my stomach drop. Someone had spliced into my power line. A secondary cable ran from this junction directly toward my neighbor's yard, disappearing beneath their pristine hedge border. I stood motionless in the rain, processing what this meant. Someone was stealing my electricity. I directed my flashlight toward my neighbor's house. Through their large bay window, I saw movement. Karen Winters, head of the HOA board, stood watching me. Our eyes met briefly before she stepped back from the window, disappearing into the shadows of her home. The realization hit me like lightning. Karen, who lived in the largest house on the block, who had recently completed extensive outdoor renovations including a heated pool, landscape lighting, and a hot tub, was stealing my electricity to power her extravagant lifestyle. The anger rose within me like a tide. All those condescending comments at neighborhood meetings about conservation and community standards, all while she literally siphoned power from my home. I photographed the connection with my phone, careful to document every detail. This was not some accident or misunderstanding. This was deliberate theft. And as the rain soaked through my clothes, I made a silent promise. Karen would pay for every kilowatt she had stolen. To understand the audacity of what Karen Winters had done, you need to understand who Karen Winters was in our community. She was not just any neighbor. She was the president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, a position she had held for 8 consecutive years. No one dared run against her. Those who had tried in the past found themselves subjected to unexpected property inspections, resulting in violations and fines. Karen was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in designer clothing, hair perfectly styled, driving either her white Mercedes SUV or her husband's black Jaguar. They had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 12 years ago, and within 6 months, she had secured a position on the HOA board. 2 years later, she became president after the previous president suddenly resigned amid rumors of harassment. Her house was the showcase of the neighborhood. 3 stories, 5 bedrooms, with a recently renovated backyard featuring a heated pool, 8-person hot tub, outdoor kitchen, and elaborate landscape lighting that illuminated her property like a resort every evening until well past midnight. The renovations had been completed approximately 6 months ago, right around the time my electric bills began their mysterious climb. I had interacted with Karen several times since moving in. Our first meeting occurred 3 days after I arrived. She appeared at my door with what she called a welcome basket, but what was actually a folder containing HOA regulations and a list of violations she had already noted on my property. The front garden beds needed more color. My garbage bins were visible from the street. The shade of my front door was not on the approved color palette. During HOA meetings, Karen controlled the room like a courtroom judge. She dismissed concerns from other homeowners while prioritizing the issues raised by her social circle. When I brought up the need for improved street lighting for safety, Karen quickly tabled the discussion, citing budget concerns. The following week, however, the association approved funds for new decorative signage at the neighborhood entrance, a project Karen had personally championed. 2 months ago, I attended a neighborhood barbecue hosted by Karen and her husband, Robert. Their backyard transformation was impressive but excessive. Heated pool tiles that changed color, programmable water features, and enough outdoor lighting to be visible from space. Karen proudly announced that despite all these features, their electricity bill had barely changed, thanks to their smart energy solutions. Now I understood how that was possible. The day after discovering the illegal connection, I called a licensed electrician to confirm my findings. Frank arrived at 9 in the morning, and I showed him what I had found. His face darkened as he examined the connection. "This is not just theft," Frank said, shaking his head. "This is dangerous. This splice job is amateur work. It could easily cause a fire or electrocution. Whoever did this knew enough to be dangerous but not enough to be safe." Frank documented everything, taking detailed photographs and measurements. He estimated that based on the connection type and the distance to Karen's property, she could be drawing significant power, especially when running pool heaters, hot tub systems, and landscape lighting. "I have seen utility theft before," Frank said, "but nothing this brazen in a neighborhood like this. You need to document everything and report this immediately." I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. I photographed the connection from multiple angles. I reviewed my power consumption logs, identifying patterns that coincided with times when Karen's pool lights would turn on or when her hot tub would likely be in use. I collected my electricity bills from the past 6 months, highlighting the dramatic increases. I now faced a decision: confront Karen directly or escalate to authorities immediately. After careful consideration, I decided a direct approach was warranted first. Perhaps there was some explanation I had not considered. Perhaps her contractor had made this connection without her knowledge. I wanted to give her the opportunity to make this right before taking more serious action. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, sunny and mild. I checked my appearance in the mirror one last time, ensuring I looked composed and professional. I wore casual but neat clothing. I wanted to project calm authority, not aggression. In my pocket was my phone with the photographs. In my hand, a folder containing printouts of my electric bills and the electrician's report. I took a deep breath and walked the short distance to Karen's house. Her property was immaculate as always, not a blade of grass out of place. flower beds bursting with color-coordinated blooms that undoubtedly met HOA standards. I pressed the doorbell and heard the melodic chime echo inside. After a moment, the door opened, and Corinne appeared, wearing white linen pants and a blue silk blouse, looking like she had stepped out of a luxury home magazine. "Oh, hello," she said, her surprise quickly masked by a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "What can I do for you this morning?" "Good morning, Corinne," I replied. "I was hoping we could discuss something important. It is regarding a property line issue that has come to my attention." Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She hesitated before stepping back and gesturing toward her foyer. "Of course, please come in. We can talk in the living room." I followed her into a space that looked more like a furniture showroom than a lived-in home. Everything was perfectly arranged, not a cushion out of place. We sat across from each other, me on a sofa and Corinne in an armchair that positioned her slightly above my eye level. A power move, I realized. How appropriate. "Now what is this property line concern?" she asked, folding her hands in her lap. "During recent maintenance on my yard, I discovered something concerning," I began, keeping my voice steady. "There appears to be an unauthorized electrical connection tapping into my power supply near where our properties meet." I removed my phone and opened He photographs, turning the screen toward her. Her expression did not change, but I noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped her hands tighter. "I have had an electrician verify that this connection is drawing power from my system and feeding directly into your property," I continued. "This explains why my electric bills have increased dramatically over the past 6 months." Corinne's face transformed. The polite neighbor vanished, replaced by something colder and more calculated. "Those photographs could be taken anywhere," she said dismissively. "There is no proof that is even on our property line." I pulled out the electrician's report. The electrician documented the exact GPS coordinates. "The connection is definitely between our properties, and it is definitely feeding into your electrical system." Corinne leaned forward, her voice hardening. "That area actually belongs to our property. If you check the property surveys, you will find that the previous owners of your home incorrectly assumed that land was theirs. Any utilities running through that area are rightfully ours to access." This was an unexpected claim. I had reviewed my property documents thoroughly before purchasing and was confident in the boundaries. Even if there were a property line dispute, which there is not, tapping into my electrical system without permission or notification is illegal, I replied. "I have copies of my property survey that clearly show the boundaries." Corinne stood abruptly. "I do not appreciate these accusations. My husband and I have lived here for 12 years. We are respected members of this community. You have been here, 6 months? Perhaps you should be more concerned with your own property violations than making unfounded accusations against board members." "This is not about the HOA, Corinne. This is about electricity theft." "Theft?" Her voice rose sharply. "How dare you use that word in my home? Do you have any idea who my husband is? He is a personal friend of the police chief. We donate to the department's charity fund every year." At that moment, a door opened elsewhere in the house, and heavy footsteps approached. Robert Winters appeared in the doorway, a tall man with silver hair and an imposing presence. He wore golf attire and a deep frown. "Is everything all right, Corinne?" he asked, eyes locked suspiciously on me. "Our new neighbor is making ridiculous accusations about electrical lines," Corinne said, her voice dripping with disdain. Robert stepped fully into the room. "I suggest you leave now. If you have concerns about property lines, You can have your lawyer contact ours. But I warn you, frivolous claims will be met with counteractions. We have documented numerous violations on your property that the board has been generously overlooking during your adjustment period. I stood gathering my documents. There was no point continuing this conversation. They had made their position clear. Deny, deflect, and threaten. I will be pursuing this matter further, I said calmly. I wanted to give you the opportunity to address it directly first. Are you threatening us? Robert stepped closer. No, I am informing you of my next steps. Good day. I walked out, feeling their glares burning into my back. As I crossed their perfect lawn, I noticed curtains moving in neighboring houses. Our confrontation had not gone unnoticed. The stakes had just been raised significantly. Corinne and Robert had made it clear they would not acknowledge their actions. They believed their status in the community made them untouchable. But they had seriously underestimated who they were dealing with. What Corinne and Robert did not know about me would prove to be their undoing. Before moving to Oak Ridge Estates, I had spent 20 years as a contract attorney at Harrington, Mayer and Associates, one of the most respected law firms in the state. I had retired early, seeking a quieter life away from the high-pressure legal world. I had chosen not to broadcast my professional background when moving into the neighborhood, preferring to be known simply as a new resident rather than being immediately approached for free legal advice. That evening after the confrontation, I pulled out my laptop and began researching utility theft laws in our state. The statutes were clear. Unauthorized connection to power supplies was both a civil and criminal offense. Civil damages could include not only reimbursement for stolen utilities, but also punitive damages, especially if the theft was deemed willful and deliberate. Criminal penalties could include fines and even jail time for more severe cases. I reached out to my former colleague, Michael Harrington, senior partner at my old firm. We had worked together for 15 years and maintained a friendship after my retirement. I explained the situation during our phone call. This is textbook utility theft, plain and simple, Michael said after hearing the details. The fact that they are claiming disputed property lines makes it even worse. They are essentially admitting they knew about the connection. What would you recommend as the most effective approach? I asked. Document everything. Get statements from the electrician. Calculate approximate usage based on their outdoor features. Then we hit them with a formal demand letter on firm letterhead. People like this respond to official intimidation because they are used to being the intimidators. Michael offered to let me use the firm name for the demand letter, giving it the weight of a major law practice rather than an individual homeowner. I spent the next week gathering all necessary documentation. I contacted the utility company and requested historical usage data for my property, going back 2 years before I moved in. The pattern was clear. Electricity usage had been consistent until 6 months ago when it suddenly doubled. I also began discreetly asking other neighbors about their experiences with Corinne and Robert. The stories were revealing. The Millers had been threatened with HOA fines until they removed a small vegetable garden from their backyard, only to watch Corinne install her own larger garden the following month. The Patels had been denied permission to install solar panels for aesthetic reasons, despite the panels not being visible from the street. The Johnsons had their request for a wheelchair ramp delayed for months through bureaucratic HOA procedures when Mrs. Johnson developed mobility issues. A pattern emerged of selective enforcement and personal vendettas disguised as community standards. Corinne and Robert had been bullying the neighborhood for years, but never had they been so bold as to physically tap into someone else's utilities. I contacted a certified electrical engineer who specialized in power consumption analysis. After reviewing the photographs and specifications of Karen's outdoor features, he provided an estimate of the electricity being diverted. The pool heater alone, when operating, would consume substantial power. Add to that the hot tub, landscape lighting, and outdoor entertainment systems, and the numbers were staggering. Using conservative estimates, the engineer calculated that over 6 months, Karen and Robert had likely consumed approximately $4,500 worth of electricity through their illegal connection. This formed the base of my claim, but utility theft laws allowed for much more than simple reimbursement. I created a detailed spreadsheet breaking down the stolen electricity by month and estimated usage. To this base amount, I added statutory damages as permitted by law, which allowed for triple damages in cases of willful theft. I included potential criminal penalties that could be assessed if the case went to prosecution. I added interest, calculated daily from the beginning of the theft. I included the cost of repairs to my electrical system that would be necessary after removing their illegal connection. I added estimated legal fees that would accumulate if this matter proceeded to court. When all calculations were complete, the total came to just over $100,000. The number was large but legally justifiable under the relevant statutes. More importantly, it would send a clear message that I was not a hapless victim they could intimidate into silence. I drafted the demand letter with Michael's help, striking the perfect balance between legal formality and implied threat. The letter detailed the discovery of the illegal connection, the documentation we had collected, the calculated damages, and the potential criminal implications. It specified that payment in full would be expected within 30 days, or legal proceedings would commence without further notice. Michael reviewed the final document and added his signature alongside mine, listing my former title at the firm as of counsel. The letter was printed on the official Harrington, Mayer and Associates letterhead, complete with the firm's impressive State Street address and gold embossed logo. We prepared a complete package including the demand letter, damage calculations, photographs, the electrician's report, and relevant statute citations. Looking at the finished product, I felt a grim satisfaction. Karen had assumed I was just another neighbor she could bully and exploit. She was about to discover how wrong that assumption had been. The package was professional, intimidating, and completely legitimate. Every claim could be substantiated, every number justified. This was not empty posturing. This was legal warfare, and I was fighting on familiar ground. The next step would be delivery. This would not be sent by mail. This warranted personal delivery, and I wanted to see Karen's face when she realized exactly who she had been stealing from. The morning I planned to deliver the demand package dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit I had worn countless times to court proceed. Dings, professional, authoritative, unmistakably serious. I placed the documents in a leather portfolio embossed with the Harrington, Mayer and Associates logo, a parting gift from the firm upon my retirement. Before leaving my house, I made 2 important calls. First, I contacted my immediate neighbors on either side, Tom and Alice Martinez to the left and the elderly Wilsons to the right. Without revealing specifics, I mentioned there might be some activity between my house and the Winters property today that they might find interesting to observe. Both families had their own history with Karen's tyrannical HOA leadership and understood my subtle suggestion. My second call was to Michael, confirming he was available should legal questions arise during the confrontation. He wished me luck and reminded me to record the interaction if possible. Our state had single-party consent for recordings, making it perfectly legal for me to document the conversation without informing Karen or Robert. I checked my appearance one last time and activated the recording app on my phone before slipping it into my breast pocket. The walk to Karen's house felt different this time. Last weekend, I had approached as a concerned neighbor. Today, I approached as legal counsel with decades of experience delivering bad news to opposing parties. Several neighbors were coincidentally tending their gardens or retrieving mail as I walked purposefully down the street. News traveled fast in Oak Ridge Estates, and my previous visit to the Winters home had not gone unnoticed. I nodded politely to Mrs. Wilson, who had positioned herself near her roses with a clear view of the Winters' front entrance. I rang the doorbell and stood tall, portfolio tucked professionally under my arm. After a moment, the door swung open, and Corinne appeared. She wore tennis whites and held a glass of iced tea, clearly not expecting any visitors. Her practiced smile froze when she recognized me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not bothering with pleasantries this time. "Good morning, Mrs. Winters. I am here on official business to deliver legal documents regarding the matter we discussed previously." Her eyes widened slightly at my formal tone and attire. She glanced past me, noticing the neighbors pretending not to watch. "What legal documents? What is this about?" Her voice had an edge of uncertainty now. "May I come in? This is a private legal matter that would be best discussed indoors." Corinne hesitated, then stepped back reluctantly. "Fine, but make it quick. I have a tennis match in 30 minutes. I followed her into the living room, the same space where our previous conversation had occurred. This time, I remained standing, maintaining the psychological advantage. "Mrs. Winters, I am here today representing Harrington, Mayor, and Associates in the matter of utility theft and property damage." I opened the portfolio and removed the document package. "What are you talking about? You are not a lawyer." Her dismissive tone could not hide her growing concern. "Actually, I practiced law for 20 years with Harrington, Mayor, and Associates before my retirement. I specialized in contract law and civil litigation." I handed her the package. "This is a formal demand letter regarding the unauthorized electrical connection between your property and mine." Corinne took the package automatically, her eyes fixed on the law firm letterhead. She flipped through the first few pages, her face paling when she reached the damages calculation sheet with the final figure prominently displayed at the bottom. $100,000. This is absurd. This is harassment." Her voice rose sharply. "The calculation is detailed on page 4. The base amount represents the estimated electricity stolen over 6 months. The remainder includes statutory damages, potential criminal penalties, repair costs, and legal fees, all permissible under state law for willful utility theft. I am calling Robert right now, and then our attorney." Corinne reached for her phone. "That would be advisable. You have 30 days to respond to the demand. If payment is not received, we will proceed with both civil litigation and criminal complaints. The utility company has already been notified of the unauthorized connection and will be conducting their own investigation." Corinne's composure cracked completely. "You cannot do this to us. Do you know who we are in this community?" "Yes, Mrs. Winters. I know exactly who you are. That is why I have prepared so thoroughly." I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. I would advise against any retaliatory actions through the HOA. Documentation of the timing of any sudden violations or fines would strongly suggest witness intimidation, which would only strengthen our case." I walked out of her house, closing the door behind me on her stunned expression. As I crossed her perfect lawn, I noticed at least 5 neighbors now up and lie watching from various vantage points. The community theater was in full attendance. Back in my home, I watched through my kitchen window as Corinne paced frantically in her living room, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly with my demand package in hand. Within 15 minutes, Robert's Jaguar screeched into the driveway, and he ran into the house. Their heated conversation was visible through their large windows, though the words were inaudible from this distance. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled at my kitchen table. Phase 1 was complete. The ball was now in their court, but I held all the cards. Years of legal experience had taught me the value of patience at this stage. People like Corinne and Robert would cycle through predictable emotions: denial, anger, attempted intimidation, and eventually, when those failed, panic. It was only a matter of time before they realized the seriousness of their situation. My phone rang. It was Michael. "How did it go?" he asked. Exactly as expected. Initial shock, denial, threats to call their attorney. "Perfect. Now we wait. Want to bet how long before their lawyer calls me directly?" "I give it less than 24 hours, I replied. As it turned out, I was being generous. The call came in just 3 hours later. News travels at the speed of light in suburban neighborhoods. By that evening, my phone was buzzing with text messages from neighbors I barely knew. Word had spread about the confrontation at the Winters house, though the details remained deliciously vague, morphing with each retelling. Some neighbors had seen me in my suit, others had noticed Corinne's distress, and Robert's hasty return home had not gone unobserved. While I maintained professional discretion about the legal details, I did not correct the general understanding that the untouchable Winters family was finally facing consequences. The following morning, Jennifer Patel from 3 doors down brought me a homemade chai latte. As we chatted on my front porch, she confided that Corinne had blocked their solar panel installation while simultaneously advocating for her friend Linda to get approval for an even larger system. "We were afraid to fight back," Jennifer admitted. "Corinne implied that my husband could lose his position on the community planning committee if we made trouble." By midweek, I had received similar visits from 4 other neighbors, each sharing their own stories of intimidation and selective rule enforcement. The Martinez family revealed they had been fined for their son's basketball hoop, while the Winters grandson had a permanent playhouse structure that violated the same regulations. The Johnsons shared how their request for a wheelchair ramp had been repeatedly delayed with paperwork requirements, until they finally gave up and moved Mrs. Johnson to a first-floor bedroom instead. A pattern of abuse was emerging that extended far beyond my stolen electricity. Corinne had created a neighborhood fiefdom where rules applied selectively based on personal relationships and perceived status. Wednesday evening, an emergency HOA meeting was announced for Friday night. The email notification cited urgent community concerns regarding board governance as the agenda. I had not requested this meeting, but I suspected the growing community discontent had forced the remaining board members to act. Thursday morning, a utility company truck pulled into the neighborhood. I had indeed reported the illegal connection to them after delivering my demand letter. 2 technicians spent hours examining the connection point, taking photographs and measurements. Corinne watched nervously from her kitchen window but did not approach them. By afternoon, they had placed official tags on the illegal connection, documenting it as unauthorized and hazardous. That same day, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. It was Timothy Walsh, the Winters attorney. His tone was considerably less confident than I had anticipated. "I have reviewed your demand package," he began stiffly. While my clients dispute certain allegations, they are interested in resolving this matter discreetly and expeditiously. I appreciate their sudden interest in discretion, I replied. However, the utility company is now involved, and their investigation corroborates our claims. Yes, well, Walsh cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we could discuss a more reasonable settlement figure. The figure is based on statutory damages prescribed by law. However, I would be willing to discuss payment terms. Walsh pushed for a reduced amount, but I held firm. We eventually agreed to continue discussions after the HOA meeting, which was shaping up to be a neighborhood referendum on the winter's leadership. Friday evening arrived, and the community center was packed to capacity. Neighbors who had never attended HOA meetings suddenly appeared deeply invested in community governance. Karen and D. Robert arrived last, their usual confident demeanor replaced by tight smiles and nervous glances. Karen took her place at the president's table, but it was clear from the vice president's body language that something had shifted in the power dynamic. The meeting began with standard procedures, but when the floor opened for community concerns, the dam broke. One after another, neighbors stood to share their experiences with selective enforcement, delayed approvals, and outright intimidation. Some stories I had heard privately, others were new revelations that clearly shocked parts of the audience. Throughout it all, Karen sat rigidly, her face a mask of controlled fury. When Jennifer Patel directly asked about the utility company's investigation of connections between certain properties, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to Karen, who stammered something about routine maintenance and misunderstandings. Robert attempted to redirect the conversation to upcoming community events, but the mood had shifted irreversibly. When the meeting ended, the Winters hurried out without their usual socializing, ignored by neighbors who had once courted their favor. Saturday morning, a property surveyor arrived at my request. As he worked along our property line, several neighbors casually found reasons to walk by, observing the proceedings. The surveyor confirmed what I already knew. The property line was exactly where my deed indicated, placing the electrical connection point clearly on my property. More significantly, his measurements revealed that Karen's prized rose garden, koi pond, and approximately 8 feet of their extended patio all encroached on my land. This was leverage I had not anticipated but would certainly use in negotiations. By Saturday afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Timothy Walsh, and his voice conveyed defeat. My clients would like to arrange a meeting to discuss settlement terms. They are prepared to address all concerns, including the property line issues identified today. The tables had turned completely. The neighborhood tyrants were now seeking mercy from the very community they had bullied for years. Monday morning, I entered the conference room at Harrington, Mayor, and associates dressed in my best suit. Michael greeted me with a firm handshake before we took our positions at one side of the large mahogany table. The setting was deliberately intimidating, with law degrees and professional awards lining the walls, speaking silently of the firm's power and influence. At precisely 9 o'clock, Timothy Walsh entered with Karen and Robert Winters. Gone were the designer clothes and confident postures. Karen wore a simple navy dress, her usual jewelry absent. Robert looked as though he had aged years in just a week. They took their seats across from us, avoiding direct eye contact. "Thank you all for coming," Michael began formally. "We are here to discuss settlement terms regarding the unauthorized electrical connection between the Winters property and my client's residence, as well as the related property encroachment issues." Timothy Walsh cleared his throat. My clients are prepared to disconnect the electrical line immediately and restore the property to its proper condition. That is already underway by order of the utility company, I noted. We are here to discuss compensation for past theft and damages. Karen flinched at the word theft, but remained silent. Michael slid a document across the table. Our final settlement terms are outlined here. The amount has been adjusted to $87,500, accounting for removal of certain potential criminal penalties, contingent upon full cooperation and immediate action. Walsh reviewed the document with his clients, whispering intensely. Robert shook his head several times, but Karen eventually placed a restraining hand on his arm. Their silent exchange spoke volumes about the dynamics of their relationship. In addition to financial compensation, I continued, we require a formal resignation from all HOA positions, effective immediately, and a public acknowledgement of the violations at the next community meeting. That is out of the question, Robert snapped, finally breaking his silence. Karen has dedicated years to this community. The utility company's report has been filed with their fraud department, Michael countered smoothly. Without this settlement, they will proceed with their own criminal complaints, which we cannot control. Additionally, the property survey clearly shows multiple structures encroaching on my client's land. Without agreement, those would need to be removed entirely, including the rose garden Mrs. Winters won awards for last spring. The room fell silent as the full weight of their situation sank in. Karen whispered something to Walsh, who looked surprised but nodded reluctantly. My clients will agree to the financial terms and HOA resignation, Walsh said carefully. Regarding the public acknowledgement, they request a joint statement indicating a misunderstanding about property boundaries rather than an admission of theft. Michael and I exchanged glances. The money and resignation were the substantive points. A face-saving joint statement was acceptable if it achieved our goals without protracted litigation. We can work with that language, I conceded, provided the financial settlement is paid within 7 days and the resignation submitted by close of business today. After another hour of negotiating specific language and terms, we reached a final agreement. Karen and Robert signed the documents with visible reluctance. As pens scratched paper, I observed Karen's hands trembling slightly. The neighborhood tyrant had been dethroned. 2 days later, workers arrived to remove the illegal electrical connection and restore the proper boundary between our properties. Neighbors found excuses to walk by, witnessing the physical manifestation of the winter's downfall. That weekend, the HOA vice president announced a special election to fill the suddenly vacant president position. 3 neighbors immediately volunteered as candidates, promising transparency and fair enforcement of community standards. The financial settlement arrived via bank transfer exactly 7 days after our meeting. Most of it went to actual damages and legal fees, but I used the remainder to host a neighborhood block party in my front yard. Nearly everyone attended, except the Winters, who had become conspicuously absent from community events. As neighbors mingled in my yard, sharing stories and actually getting to know each other for the first time without Karen's influence, Jennifer Patel raised a toast. To boundaries, she said with a meaningful smile, and to neighbors who respect them. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I noticed lights on in the Winters' house. Through their window, I could see Karen watching our gathering, her expression unreadable from this distance. Our eyes met briefly before she turned away and closed the curtains. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for an entire neighborhood that could now rebuild its sense of community without fear of petty tyranny. My power bills returned to normal levels, but the true power had shifted in Oak Ridge Estates. Karen's electrical theft had inadvertently illuminated a path to a more equitable neighborhood for everyone.